Good morning, everyone, from a very hot and sunny London, and welcome to this, which is our second undergraduate virtual open day this summer. My name is Tom Nickson. I'm head of the MA at the Courtauld, but I also teach on the BA programme. My specialist area of research and teaching is medieval art and architecture. So, for example, I teach on our first year foundations course, and I also teach a third year special option that looks at art and architecture in medieval Spain and the interaction of medieval Christian, Jewish and Muslim cultures. But today I'm going to be focusing on the skills that you gain from an history of art degree and thinking about how our career service can provide guidance during your time at the Courtauld, and then after you graduate, how our alumni team will support you. We'll also explore a variety of careers that our alumni have gone on to, and I'll be joined by a number of alumni today. Eugen, who is a curator at the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum, and Molly, who works at the financial consultants, Deloitte, as well as a recent graduate, Ashley. And they're going to talk after me about how studying at the Courtauld helped prepare them for their respective careers in very different fields. And at the end of the session, I should say as well, that you are welcome to ask them or me any questions that you may have. And I should just say also before we begin that if you haven't already, you can watch the recording from our first open day on the Virtual Open Day Hub. And there you can find more about the BA in History of Art, our resources and facilities, and also the range of support that we offer to students. But I want to say, to begin now with just a few words about the kinds of transferable skills that you gain from an art history degree, which really involve rigorous looking, reading, thinking, writing, and discussing. So in many ways, art history is rather like history, English, or any other humanities subject. It teaches you to analyze and interrogate written sources, be those primary sources such as poems, contracts, accounts, or histories drawn up around the time that artworks were made, or secondary sources. That is to say, the ways that other scholars have thought about those artworks. You learn to sift and synthesize those sources, to listen to different perspectives from your teachers and classmates, and to communicate your own new ideas in written and verbal form. And you also learn to manage weekly workloads in a much more independent fashion than you would at school or college, and how to pursue your own lines of research and inquiry. And I think for a lot of students, that's one of the most satisfying parts of the course, developing the skills to really follow your own interests. But art history, I think it's important to underline, is different from other humanities subjects like history or English, in that it also places objects, images, videos, and buildings at the center of that inquiry. It recognizes, for example, that images on these slides I'm showing you now are created and understood in ways quite different than the texts, and that visual culture is central to the way that we understand our past and present. And that, I think, is something that we all understand instinctively whenever we use Instagram or TikTok or walk through a city and see historic buildings jostling next to modern ones. But art history also pushes you, I think, to interrogate those visual cultures and recognizing that the images are good to think with. And that's something that we've all seen, particularly, for example, in the last year, where we've seen this very powerful debate about public sculpture and the Black Lives Matter movement. Those issues that forced us really to think hard about what sculpture does and how we tell stories about the past. And I think, that that hopefully as art history graduates, you will be equipped with the kinds of skills that enable you to engage in those debates, whether it's in a kind of professional or a private capacity. So art history is, I hope, a challenging subject, one that makes us think in fresh ways in order to better understand art and society. And as a relatively young discipline, it's only really been taught in this country for the last 100 years or so. It also draws on many other fields, much more, I think, than other more established subjects do. So, for example, as an art historian, I'm often frustrated by the ways that traditionally trained historians think of images as simply illustrating a text in some kind of subservient relationship, when actually images do something much more interesting and independent than that. That comes, I think, from the fact that history has such a long and kind of developed history of its own, whereas art historians are very accustomed to drawing on a wide number of other subjects to inform their studies. So philosophy, history, economics, theology, anthropology, literature, law, and so on. All these subjects are ones that you might engage with. And I think that helps to open the range of possibilities for you when it comes to choosing your careers. So when you come, we hope that you will be open-minded and inclusive in your thinking. And as you learn, you hope that we hope that you will become questioning and challenging. This is the way to become good citizens, whatever career path you follow. So above all, I think an art history degree is about having 3 years to discover a subject that you love and to study it with others who love it. And I think that's a really important distinction from some more obviously vocational subjects, which some students may choose only as a kind of means to an end. The best way, I think, that you can really help your career, and I might say as well, your kind of quality of life, is to study something that genuinely fascinates you. That's what's going to drive you to do better in your time at university and beyond. So it's a chance also to learn more about things you know, but to learn about things you don't know as well. We're not going to just repeat back to you what you might think of as constituting art history. It's an opportunity over 3 years to learn more about yourself and how you work best. Are you, do you prefer writing or speaking? Are you confident talking and debating in front of a group? Are you a great organizer? It's a chance to work on those skills, but also to work out where your weaknesses are and to work on them too. And those kinds of skills will be really useful when you go into different careers after university. And we want to put you in as good a position as we can for when you graduate, so that you are in a position to contribute actively to society in whatever career you choose to follow. And I should say that we're certainly not only interested in creating professional art historians, although that's certainly very satisfying for teachers. Whatever career you follow, we hope that you will leave the courtauld with a lifelong fascination for the subject and will be a kind of advocate for it in lots of different fields. And we hope that we can help you to do that by giving you the confidence, the skills and the knowledge to thrive in the future, so that you are an adaptable, creative, versatile and engaged employee. So what skills will you gain? The ability to synthesize information, that is to kind of boil down a huge amount of reading and looking into short essays or presentations. The ability to develop and present your ideas coherently, cogently, and succinctly, and to be aware and critical of how the visual and material world around you has an impact on how everyone thinks and behaves. And as you transition from your degree to thinking about a very dynamic careers service that offers a range of support from the very moment you arrive until from the very moment that you arrive at the Courtauld, and including 2 years after you graduate. So you can take advantage, for example, of one-to-one careers appointments with our careers advisors, practice interviews. There's a number of online resources that our career service can direct you towards, with help sheets and magazines. We also have the Courtauld Institute Careers Programme, which is a whole kind of series of events and activities that help to develop your thinking around careers. We have a number of employer and industry events, so when we get in alumni and sometimes non-alumni to talk about different professions and the kinds of skills they're looking at. And this year, for instance, we've been holding online insight sessions that focus on different industries, from curating and other museum careers to things like journalism, finance, and much, much more. And our graduates go on to work in a range of arts and non-arts careers. So that includes curators, conservators, art dealers, auction house experts, but also things like lawyers, entrepreneurs, publishers, media professionals, teachers, banking and finance, journalists, business, marketing, communications, fashion buyers, civil services. So there's a whole range of different employment options that are open to you. And as I say, I think that the best way to prepare yourself for those is to really be engaged in your degree. I should say that as well as our career service, and in tandem with them, our alumni, after you graduate, can help to support you in a range of different ways. So our alumni team hold a really vibrant calendar of events in London and across the UK, and in fact around the world. And at the moment, those are happening online, but we're hoping certainly that those will take place in person next year. And these events typically include a range of professional networking opportunities. We also give alumni access to our exclusive online jobs boards. So that's a series of job adverts that are accessible only to Courtauld alumni, where in particular prominent arts organizations publish job posts specifically targeting the kinds of skills that Courtauld graduates have. And we have, on average, around about kind of 240 jobs a year posted on that alumni jobs board. There's also a monthly alumni newsletter, which updates you on alumni publications, new job appointments, video content, articles, etc., and as well as forthcoming alumni events. And then you also get lifetime access to our library facilities. So before I end, let me just give you a few facts about our alumni network. So we've got a network of over 8,000 contactable alumni spread across 83 countries around the world. And many of those lead some of the world's top galleries and museums. So Courtauld alumni currently, for instance, have leading roles at Tate Modern, the National Gallery, National Portrait Gallery, the Royal Collection, Dulwich Picture Gallery, the V&A, Photographers Gallery, National Gallery of Art in Washington, and several others. So many do go into those kind of high level posts, but also a lot of our graduates go use the skills that they've learned here to pursue successful careers in non-arts industries, including finance, law, government, the non-profit sector, and medicine, and others besides. And just to give you a kind of a sense of the top arts employers of Courtauld graduates, those include the Tate, V&A, Sotheby's and Christie's, the auctioneers, and then of non-arts employers of Courtauld graduates include, for example, HSBC, the BBC, Amazon, and a number of national newspapers. And so just before I move on to the three alumni who are joining us today, let me just highlight just from kind of 4 examples of the different kind of career paths that our alumni have taken. So here you can see Charlie Casely Hayford, who finished his BA in 2009 and co-founded the international fashion brand Casely Hayford, aged just 22. Coco Chen, who graduated in 2015. In fact, she was my personal tutee. It's very nice to see her here. And she's now pursuing a career in finance, having worked at Deloitte and now at Credit Suisse. Jessie Bloomfield, you can see here, she graduated in 2013 and she's currently creative producer of Tate Late at Tate Modern, which I imagine must be a super fun job. She's also a freelance project manager at Tate and runs public art tours at Tate Modern and Tate Britain. And she also writes about art and culture and produces short films for the Royal Academy of Arts and BFI. Including interviews with renowned artists. And then last, you can see Nicholas Cullinan here on the right, who in fact stayed at the Courtauld after graduating in 2002, did his MA and PhD here, and is now the director of the National Portrait Gallery and is leading a £35 million transformation of the gallery to make it hopefully more relevant, more open, and more accessible. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to introduce our 3 alumni. And I'm going to introduce them each in turn. I've asked them to say a few words about their kind of careers trajectory, and then I'm going to ask some questions for them. So I'll hand over now first to Eugen. Eugen, do you want to say a few words about your trajectory?
Thank you, Tom, and thanks for having me here today. My name's Eugen. I graduated from the Courtauld BA History of Art in 2012, and then the MA in Modern and Contemporary East Asian Art with Dr. Wenyu Teo, also at the Courtauld in 2013. I currently work as project curator for the exhibition Hallyu, the Korean Wave at the Victoria and Albert Museum, which is opening in September next year. Before that, I was assistant curator in the Asian department, also at the V&A for 3 years, working with the East Asian Art Collection, which has over 70,000 objects from Korea, China, and Japan across 3 galleries, and also across the ceramics and the various thematic galleries at the V&A. And I got to work on rotating case displays, to working on books along with my colleagues from other departments like the fashion and textiles departments. So it was quite a varied job. It's also quite a hands-on practical job. So often I get to work directly with moving, handling, and checking objects in the stores or in the galleries. Prior to that, I was PR and press officer at the National Gallery for 2 years, where I worked on a variety of proactive campaigns promoting the gallery's temporary exhibitions. But I also got to work on what's called crisis management, which are sort of dealing with some of the potentially sensitive or contentious issues that puts the museum or the gallery's reputation at stake. So that was quite an exciting part to work on. And my first job was at an international art PR agency for a year, which I actually found through the Courtauld Alumni online jobs board. So that's a very helpful board. And when I graduated from the Courtauld, I began my career by doing a variety of museum internships, including at the Peggy Guggenheim collection in Venice, and also at the British Museum's Learning Department. So I sought to get kind of various different roles across what working in museums could be like, but also worked part-time jobs in a contemporary art gallery in London and Seoul, and also at Christie's in New York.
Brilliant. Thanks, Eugen. It sounds like you've been extremely busy since graduating. So in a moment, I'm going to put some questions to you. But first, I would like to pass over to Molly to say a few words.
Hi, thanks, Tom. So I was at the Courtauld between 2012 and 2016, so I did my undergraduate, and then I did a master's degree in Byzantine history of art with Dr. Eastman. So that was my undergraduate, and at the same time I was working in kind of various private galleries in London, and found that I was actually kind of more interested in the business side in terms of work. So when I finished my master's degree, I took a completely different tack and joined a Moore Kingston Smith, which is a top 10 accounting firm, and I trained to become a chartered accountant with a client base that was almost exclusively media and arts. So I did a few art collections. We did the Royal Academy audit, the kind of all sorts of things like that, people who did the post-production on The Crown and that kind of thing. So that was my client base. And I qualified there, and it takes 3 years. And when I finished, once I'd qualified, I kind of became interested in a lot of these firms are, and a lot of the money kind of involved is private equity and investment management. And I was kind of interested in seeing the other side, not just the client side. So I decided to join Deloitte's investment management and private equity department at the offices in London. Where I was for a year working on venture capital audits, which was in fact very interesting because I got to work with the guys that owned one of the other companies that PR companies that I'd looked at previously in my career. So I kind of came full circle there. But in the last year, actually, I've been seconded as a consultant to the Department of Health and Social Care, and have been working on COVID-19 response for the government. And that's where I've been for the last year, launching kind of audit kind of verification processes across the 20,000 people, 600 plus site network, where I was responsible for outbreaks. So I've had a very varied career since being at the Courtauld, but potentially a little bit more on the unusual side than the normal trajectory, but always interesting, and always using everything that I learned whilst I was at the Courtauld, which always shocks people, but it is true, which we can come on to later. But that's me.
Brilliant, thanks, Molly. That does sound really fascinating. And last, I'll ask Ashley to say a few words.
Hi, so I'm Ashley. I've just graduated from the Courtauld actually a few weeks ago with a BA in History of Art, of course, and I will be starting my new job, my first job in education in a few weeks' time in a school in Hatfield, just outside London, Hertfordshire. I am planning to do an MA next year after my contract ends, and I'm still exploring options in terms of what I want to do for my job. And so I'm somewhat like in between the two panelists, if you like to say. So a little bit about me. I'm originally from Hong Kong and Singapore, and I joined the Courtauld after a gap year because I was considering my degree options and job options, and I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do. So I knew I wanted to do art history, and I knew the Courtauld was very good, and I knew they could provide me with different options, which is why I think the past 3 years that I've had was so great, because I was presented with so many opportunities in terms of volunteering and internships, not just because we're located in central London, but because the Courtauld has such strong ties and such a great reputation with so many different institutions. So within the first week of matriculating, we were actually contacted with volunteering opportunities with the Courtauld Digitisation Project, which is, you can do it now if you'd like. It's a project which is part of the Courtauld Connects, and what they're doing is digitizing the Whit and Conway collection, which you might have seen on TV or just elsewhere. So my friends and I, actually, we did it for fun. We thought it's a volunteering opportunity that is just great. And then it turned out to be really valuable because it landed me my first like proper art internship, which was in Asia Art Archive in Hong Kong. And my main role there was to help digitize a collection of Li Wen, who was a Singaporean artist who passed away, and they were digitizing his entire collection. And after that, because of this opportunity, it opened up a lot more, because I had the experience of archival and museum work. And then in my final year, this year, I actually picked up a freelance job as a writer for Ocular, which is a contemporary art platform. So what I did was I actually just wrote into them, telling them I'm a final year undergrad at the Courtauld. Do you have any job opportunities? And they actually were like, oh, send us a few samples of your things. And I did. I sent them a few articles that I wrote for the Courtauldian, which is the student-run publication. And that actually turned into an offer as an editorial assistant, but I turned it down as I wanted to try out my new job. So I've actually picked up many side jobs while I was at the Courtauld. I started working at an Asian supermarket in the first year, and then I did some tutoring jobs. And then I also worked as a library assistant at the library at the Courtauld. So I decided to work at school this year because I really enjoy working with children and promoting art and art history to students. And I'm still starting out, so I'm grateful for the opportunities that I've had. And I just think, looking back at these 3 years, at the Courtauld, we are presented with a lot of opportunities, not just for work, but in terms of growing our interests. So like writing for the Courtauldian, or just volunteering. And I found that when you kind of just hold on to an opportunity, it often presents a potential for another opportunity, which I think the Courtauld has helped me a lot in. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ashley. I did some of that digitization for the Conway as well, and it's super fun. I definitely recommend everyone look it up. Okay, so there will be in a moment a chance for anyone to put any questions into the chat. In fact, if you have questions already, do feel free to put them in the chat. But before we turn to those questions, I have some that I'm going to address to Eugen, Molly, and Ashley. And I will kind of ask these in turn. So the first one, I guess, is a kind of obvious one, and to some extent, some of you have already answered these questions. So make your answer as long or short as you want. But how did your degree in art history help you prepare for your career today? Eugen, do you want to answer that first?
Sure. I would say some of the core skills as a curator is the ability to research in depth, and also sort of, in a way, more importantly, to communicate this research either in writing or in different ways of speaking, in different tones as well, actually. So, for example, from wall labels for the objects in the galleries, or to sort of writing chapters in books, to writing blog posts, and also doing tours for members of the public in the galleries, which are all the skills which I developed during my degrees at the Courtauld. With my BA course, the modules were also quite varied. So I had the option to look at some medieval manuscript modules, also sensory experiences in dress and textiles with Dr. Rebecca Arnold, a pop art module, and also to Mughal painting. So this kind of variety of very specialist, but also quite wide-ranging modules allow me to experience and sort of explore these different facets of art history and see what excited me the most. And you also have the benefit also of having access to London's incredible museums and galleries at our doorstep. So, and working with these modules, I would always kind of go in to either the National Gallery or the Tate or the V&A to actually look at the objects or the works of art in person that I'm writing about, which is really quite an extraordinary thing to be able to do. Sometimes that we realize that we've taken for granted during COVID. And it was sort of during my third year module in the Mughal paintings course, and I wrote my dissertation on the depictions of Chinese porcelain and Mughal paintings, that I really became interested in the sort of cross-cultural connections in art history. And I got to develop that further with my MA course, and that really opened up my horizons and what the possibilities of art history can be in the current times, and that it's not just limited to a certain period or to the Western world. And in fact, there's so many new areas that are just under research and waiting to be discovered. So the quarter really helped me to gain confidence to carry out new research, sort of unexplored territories in art history. And it really sort of encouraged that way of thinking and approaching art history.
Brilliant. Thanks, Eugen. I'm gonna just stop you there because I want to make sure we've got time for some question things. But thank you, Molly. Can I ask the same question to you?
Yeah, so I would have said there was 5 main things that I took away from the Courtauld in terms of skills that influenced my professional life. Adaptability. So as Eugen was saying, like, we go through a huge wide kind of range of history of art, and then there's philosophy and other bits and pieces that kind of feed into that. And actually you become very adaptable. You know, there's lots of other degrees where you might just do a couple of subjects in a year and you become very specialized in something that you then don't end up using. I would say an art history degree at the Courtauld teaches you to be very adaptable, which is very useful, especially if you want to change career. Research, I would say as well. You know, I've been faced with I remember doing my master's degree and I didn't speak Greek at all. And, you know, digging through all the Greek primary sources means that any other large, complex regulatory text that I've had to deal with in my work life is not at all intimidating because it's nothing compared to Greek that you don't speak in your master's degree. And then I would say writing as well, especially when you're next to kind of economics and math grads, you don't realize how good you are at writing until you come out and you do some. And I found this in my last year. I wrote a couple of standard operating procedures for dealing with health and safety, well, long story. And I was very, very good at it. And I thought, oh goodness, thank you, Courtauld, because you taught me how to write. And then I'd say the ability to speak. I remember doing in Venice up to my knees in freezing water, doing a presentation on something on the outside of San Marco. And I just think that, you know, again, when you've done that, anything else next to it is not intimidating. And then I'd say just getting you in the door. You're always going to be the most interesting person in the room if you're in another professional kind of context outside of curating and that kind of an art field. You're always going to be one of the most interesting people in the room, and it can get you in the door. And then it's up to you. But people will take you for an interview because they fancy a chat and they want to know what your, you know, what's happening with your career, and it just sounds interesting. So I'd say that's kind of the fifth unintended consequence, is that actually it's an interesting thing. People want to talk to you. So those are the 5 things I would say.
Thanks, Molly. And lastly to Ashley, obviously it's probably harder for you to speak to this, but any thoughts on how your degrees help you prepare for your career today?
So I think actually Molly's last point was really, really true. I got to speak with a lot of people just simply because they were interested. Like, why would you study art history? And actually a lot of the things that I've learned have been so applicable to real life situations. And they've just made, for example, with, you know, the news topics of statues, and you just become a lot more of an interesting person. And at the Courtauld, I found that I did actually become so much more of a great writer and a confident writer, especially since now I'm working and talking with people who have graduated from other degrees. Yeah, but the main part for me, I think, was that the Courtauld has such a great reputation, that whatever internship you want to pick up within the art world, especially, I think they do recognize that you have a baseline of credibility as an art historian or as a writer and a researcher. So yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a couple more questions. I'm going to ask to be really kind of brief with your answers you can, so we've got time for questions from everyone. My question is really, what kind of roles, whether paid or voluntary, did you undertake while you were a student at the Courtauld? And we'll go to Eugen first again.
Oh, am I? Okay, I've unmuted myself. During my BA, I ran the Business of Art Society, which I think is still ongoing, and I got to help organize talks and events, and that helped me explore the various commercial roles that are there in the art world. I was also involved in the East Wing 10 exhibition curatorial team, which is a student-led biannual exhibition, and that's a really great fun project to do, and you actually get to be in touch with artists and have the experience of installing an artwork and writing. And that sort of counted for in my CV when I was applying for jobs, which is really great. And during my MA, I worked as the Modern and Contemporary section assistant. And it was some stacking chairs in the research seminar forums, but I also got to listen in all the really fascinating PhD and research talks, which was great. And I think when I graduated, I also had a part-time role as a research assistant to Dr. Wenitio, and that also kind of further cemented researching and sort of compiling that research.
Brilliant.
Together.
Thank you. What about you, Molly? What voluntary or paid work did you do in your BA?
So I worked actually waitressing the whole way through my degree, so that was my major paid thing. But I did also have a paid internship for Manuel Marti, one of a private art gallery. So that was also paid. In terms of unpaid, there was a lot of unpaid voluntary work. So lots of invigilating and various bits and pieces, and then also there's kind of the Courtauld talks and that kind of thing that you can give in the gallery. So there was a wide variety of voluntary work that I did throughout the whole thing. Most of it came from, in fact, the paid one as well. The paid private gallery also came from the portal. So it is really a good resource, and that was something that I used for voluntary, and then for this one paid role as well.
Thanks. Actually, you've already spoken about this a bit. I don't know if you want to add anything or.
Yeah, so actually, like Eugen, I actually did work at the Research Forum and as a student ambassador. So working for Sadia, who's running this event, and me being here talking to you guys. Yeah, and so I've had a lot of opportunities to talk to people about art history and to take part in a lot of paid internships as well. I had 2 during my time at the Courtauld, and as a freelance writer, I got paid for that as well. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And then the last question for our panelists before we turn to questions from the audience. Eugen, what advice would you give to prospective or current art history students who want to follow a similar career path to you?
So I think curatorial roles in museums are known for being quite scarce. So I would say to be open to various different roles, either in museums or sort of similar art industry areas, because that experience and skills you gain will help towards. But also at the same time, I think I would really say to develop a specialist area or kind of like a niche field in something that you're really interested in, and try to write, as freelance or just develop your own writing or run your own projects. I think these are some, really helpful things that you could do.
Thank you. And Molly, what about you? What would you recommend?
Two things. One, don't talk down, because I'll talk generally for things outside of the art industry. So don't talk down your art history degree. It is definitely up there, and if you've gone to the Courtauld, then you're very well trained and you have loads of transferable skills. Talk it up, don't talk it down, especially in yourself. Even if you want to go and work in banking, like, there is a value to it. And then the other thing is just apply, and make sure you are on top. And one of the things I wish I'd been a little bit more on top of is kind of all the penultimate year summer internships that there are in London, that I just didn't know about but should have known about, and should have been applying for. I think that's a big thing as well. Anything that requires, that just says a degree, you can apply for, and you're in with the shot. So I think that's my two things: apply, and don't talk yourself down.
Thank you, good advice. And Ashley?
Yeah, so in terms of just applying for everything, just being really open with the opportunities that you have. So last year, because of COVID, I think a lot of people in my cohort didn't manage to take up an internship, before graduating. And that's why I felt quite a need to talk to get some opportunities this year, which is why I wrote in to different places asking if there are job opportunities. So just being really, really proactive. It is quite an impressive thing to just be really, really proactive, and just take the initiative. Yeah.
Great, thanks to all of you for those answers. We've got some questions now in the chat. I'm going to try and go through these. I'm going to start with the kind of easiest ones to answer, and then we will kind of move through. Some of them I can answer, some of them I'll hand over to our panelists. But we have one question: how many students usually take the course each year? And that's about 80 to 100 students, the BA programme. So there's about 500 students altogether at the Courtauld, and about 80 to 100 per year for the BA programme, which I think, and if any of you three have comments on this, I think it's a size where by the end of your BA you might know all or most of those, but it's also enough that you can meet lots of different people. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that.
Yeah,
okay.
definitely. Oh no, I was just going to say, I remember being my first year at the BA, because it's quite a small institution compared to other universities. You really get to meet people doing the MA course and the PhD. So there's the less of a kind of, oh, they're doing a PhD kind of thing. That was really great.
Great, thank you. And then we also have a question from Rory. Is the workload, the BA and perhaps in the MA, too much to have a part-time job alongside it? And what I can tell you for that is that certainly for the BA, the Courtauld recommends that, I mean, a lot of our students do part-time work and also work during the holidays. During term time, we would recommend that you do no more than 20 hours per week. You want to give yourself enough time to devote to your studies. But I think that certainly the experience of a lot of the students that I speak to is that sometimes having a bit of work can be good because it gives a kind of structure to your week and it makes you more efficient with your academic work. But again, I don't know if Molly, Ashley, Eugen, if you want to comment on that.
I worked the whole way through, so I can definitely comment on that. And I worked between 15 and 20 hours. Pretty much the whole way through. I think what I would say is I had just turned 18, I'd moved to London, and I was working that much and trying to do a degree, and I shouldn't have done. It was a mistake. I should have just been eating baked beans for the entirety of my degree, because it is a lot of stress. Like, obviously it depends person to person, but for me, my grades suffered. So I think that you can work and it's fine, but you just have to be aware in yourself that it's not going to not impact you, it's going to impact you. So the question is, can you deal with that? So just a word of caution on that one.
Yeah. And I would say for the undergraduate, I sort of took advantage of my summer and winter holidays to do various internships, and I think that's quite a good way of balancing gaining some experience, but for it, because the BA course is quite intense. And during my MA, I mentioned earlier, I worked as a section assistant at the Courtauld, and there are lots of other kind of jobs within the Courtauld, kind of part-time roles that you can do, and that's quite handy because you're already there and it sort of complements your work as well.
To add on to that, actually, throughout my entire BA, I was actually working as a student ambassador. So I often helped out at the open day events such as these when we had them in person, and I was also working in research forum. So that meant that I was stacking a lot of chairs, preparing lots of drinks and snacks for the attendees of talks. But I also found that if I worked more than 12 hours a week, I would get quite tired. And some weeks at the Courtauld are freer than others. So sometimes you can be doing 20 hours a week and you'd be fine. But sometimes when you've got 2 back-to-back deadlines, you'd find that it's quite difficult. So I wouldn't recommend doing more than 12 hours, but it's definitely manageable, yeah.
Great, thank you. So we've got lots of questions coming in, and we'll keep going until about 1 o'clock. If we don't have a chance to answer your question in this form, we will make sure that we do so by other means. You can always email it in. But we have a question from Ruby Hollingdale, who says that she's starting the BA in September. What's the best way to prepare before going? Briefly, because I know I would say from a teacher's perspective, have a look at you should get a preliminary reading list. You don't have to read everything, but certainly engage with that. Or I would say, if you possibly can, the more you can go out and look at things, get to exhibitions, galleries, sites, whatever, training your eye and really looking, going with a friend maybe so that you talk about things is a great way to prepare. Again, I don't know if Molly, Ashley, Eugen, you have any wisdom on that?
I'm going to disagree from a non-teacher point of view and say don't relax. You're going to spend 3-4 years working really hard, depending on whether you do a master's as well. Better off you take this time to relax. You've got no pressure, and I think that unless you're really enjoying it and you're doing some light reading maybe and going to a few galleries, that's fine. But it's a great opportunity to have no stress. So enjoy it whilst it lasts.
Thank you, Molly. Yes, so well, I'll let you all choose your own route between that. Let's take some of these other questions. So the question from Destiny Street: was it difficult to find paid work straight out of the gate after your BA? Did you feel a master's was essential to start moving forward with your career? Maybe we could go back to Molly with that. And then Eugen.
So if we take my exact path, technically you don't even need a degree. It takes you longer, but technically you don't even need a degree. So yeah, master's is 100% not necessary at all in exactly what I'm doing in a second.
Thanks, Eugen.
So I think with curating in museums, we're probably at a point where things are like changing. So I think there's a quite common misconception that if you want to be a curator, then you have to go all the way through to PhD. But I think a master's does definitely help, but museums like the V&A are very open to accepting people from various different backgrounds, various different experiences. So I would say it's an advantage, but not an essential requirement.
Thank you. And Ashley, do you have a sense of this yet?
So I am planning to do an MA, but not because I think I need it, but because I hope to get into some sort of get back into art history and to advance it so that I can help other people with it as well. So I don't think it is necessary, but I am planning to do it just because I do enjoy it quite a lot as well. Yeah.
Good. A good lesson in doing a degree that you enjoy actually is of benefit, I think, in lots of ways. So the question from India Flowers: how were the summer internships helpful towards your future careers? Would anyone like to jump in with that?
I think it's critical. it's really critical. There's no two ways about it. No matter what path you're going down, summer internships are what you can't come out of your degree nowadays, especially without a master's and with no experience. And the best way to get that is over the summer.
Yeah, I would definitely add to that. Definitely, even if it's just like a week or 2 weeks. And during my undergraduate, I actually forgot to mention that I did a lot of internships in law, because there was a point in time when I did consider going into law after my undergraduate. And I did work placements in kind of solicitors firms and also shadowing barristers. And those internships were key in helping me really decide, okay, well, that's not a career path that I want to go down in. And I also tried working in auction house, and I got to rule sort of that out. So if it's just, yeah, I think it could be any field, any experience. Take advantage of your summer holidays if you can, yeah.
Okay, I think we probably have time for maybe a couple more questions before we finish. But as I say, if you have any outstanding questions, do email admissions@courtauld.ac.uk, and we can answer those individually. But this one I think will be of interest to lots of people here. Ellen asks, right, I know I want to study art history, but have no idea what to do afterwards. Do you have any tips? When did you realize what you wanted to do? Let's start with Ashley, as you are kind of closest to this in some ways.
I guess you can say I'm still in the middle of figuring out. I think I like working with children. I think I like working with younger people, and I like art history. So I'm still trying to find the balance in between. So I've been doing things to, just like what Eugen said, rule out what I like, and I think I know what I like now. So yeah, I think it would be, my biggest tip is to just do as much as you can while you can, especially as a student, and then figure out what you like to do and what you definitely don't want to do. Yeah. So.
Yeah, good advice, I think. Yeah, knowing what you don't want to do it can be very helpful as well. Eugen, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think definitely staying open to different fields. Because sometimes you might, I never thought I would try working in PR, and it was kind of accidental, and it was great fun, and I managed to develop a lot of skills. So definitely staying open, but I think also in the end they're all transferable, but yeah, it definitely helps you rule out some of the things that you don't want to do. And even if you sort of are doing a role that you don't think is directly relevant, there are also ways you can keep an interest, either by writing or doing your other sort of projects I mentioned earlier.
Thank you. And Molly?
Yeah, I completely agree with both of the other panelists. I think I'm still figuring out what I'm doing. In fact, I was in audit, then I've been in consulting for a year. I know I don't want to go to consulting for various reasons, but I think I'll be going back to my department to go and do ESG, which is environmental and sustainability stuff, rather than going back to do investment management, private equity audit. So you can. I think sometimes there's a lot of pressure to kind of figure out what you want to do just as soon as you finish your degree, but you can still figure out what you're doing later. Like, there's no pressure. I'm definitely taking a very winding path, and I'm trying everything first, and that's fine. And I'm being paid to do it, which is great.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to do one last final question, which is in some ways a kind of a big question, and so I apologise, it's difficult to answer, but I think it might be interesting. From TJ Black asks, how can the next generation of Courtauld students best change the institution from within? Does anybody want to offer thoughts on that?
What do they mean by within? Sort of, do you mind expanding on the question?
Well, I think it might be difficult to expand on it now, but I guess Well, maybe I'll ask you, Molly. I mean, you've talked about being an art historian amongst other non-art historians, and in a kind of quite a different field. How do you feel that you, do you feel that you can still use that art history and your kind of knowledge to make people think differently about art history or indeed other things?
100%. I think we're always going to be kind of ambassadors for what the Courtauld is and for what art is and for what institutions are. And in some ways, institutions are just and fields are just kind of a group of individuals and their relevant, their corresponding actions. So to kind of come back around to the question, but also answer you, Tom, I think that every time you act or you do something or you speak to someone new or you express an opinion, you are a vehicle for change, and you are also an ambassador for the field and for art and for thought. And so I'd say that really, if you want to affect change, then the way to do it is to look at your own actions and your own goals and what you want to change, and those actions are going to be how you affect change and how you can affect change on others as well, and changing their opinions. I'm pretty certain that everyone's ever met me kind of, in terms of in audit and accounting, and they've never met someone who's an art historian doing that before, and I am an ambassador for that, whether I like it or not. So I think it's all about actions, and if you want to affect change, then it's your own actions that are potentially the most powerful.
And just to add, I think sort of forming discussions or groups with people who might have a similar way of thinking or some similar beliefs, or people who kind of challenge that, and also always being open to discussions, debates. I think that's a very key way to bring about change and to expands everyone's ways of thinking.
Thank you. Ashley, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in terms of change, I'm not sure what kind of change you mean, but from my experience, people at a Courtauld have been quite open with a lot of things, some things more than others, but quite a lot of things, I think. And it's very easy to start a society, or to start, a society is a really good way to get people who think like you. For example, if you're talking about, I think there was a decolonization reading group that started this year just because a few students did say quite a lot, and created a group about it and created a reading list for everybody. So in terms of changing the institution, you can simply do that by banding together with your friends who think the same way.
Thank you. Yes, I think there's a lot to be said about being with a group of students that really care about their subjects, and the size of the Courtauld community means that you can really work together on that. Well, I think it's 1 o'clock now, so we will finish. I'd like to thank Molly and Eugen and Ashley for joining us, and for everyone in the audience, those in London that have been resisting a hot and sunny temptations outside. So thank you for joining us. This will be recorded if you want to go back and have a look at it. And if you do have any questions, I'm sorry we haven't been able to answer all of them today, but please email them to UG admissions, that's undergraduate admissions, at courtauld.ac.uk, and we hope to see you in the future. Thank you.